This session I'm going to talk in a moment about a definition of trauma to think about as you're working with those who you're working with. And we're going to unpack what are the chemicals that get released in our bodies and those who we work with, their bodies. Not only when they experience trauma, but also when they get triggered back to a trauma, which means that in our bodies, in our cells, we have a cellular memory of trauma. In our communities, we've called it that cellular memory, or some people call it blood memory. For years, that conversation and that teaching has happened. Over about the last 5 to 7 years, researchers now call it epigenetics. And so science has proven what we've always known, that in our cells and along our DNA carry the memories, not only of our own lived experiences, but also of our ancestors. So sometimes people might be triggered and not know why, because what's in their cells, the memory of their ancestors, has been triggered. We will talk a little bit more about that as we go through. And then, as per the first module near the end, I will invite you to reflect. I'll give you a couple of questions to reflect on, as well as an invitation, a call to action. So you have received, as part of the online course, the ebook for the Ripple Effect of Resiliency, Strategies for Fostering Resiliency with Indigenous Children and Families. You can turn to the section on trauma in that book. It will help you follow along as we go through these chemicals and this information. So when the brain judges a situation to be traumatic, it immediately goes into a place of protection and begins to release chemicals. And in that place of protection, it isn't necessarily about connection. And so when we're looking to heal trauma, one of the greatest ways to help heal trauma is through connection. It is through healthy, vibrant relationships that we can begin to help support those who are healing from trauma and support ourselves from healing from trauma. And those relationships for sure can be with each other, but they can also be getting out on the land, sitting by water, being under the stars, being in relationship with an animal or a pet that you love. It is about all of my relations that I have, that I can be in relationship with to help heal those wounds of trauma. In Tilly, A Story of Hope and Resilience that I read to you a piece to you in the first module, there's a scene in there when Tilly has begun her recovery from addictions, and she goes to see a counselor at the Friendship Center whose name is Bee. And as part of their work one day, Bee takes Tilly out on the land, and they go sit by a creek. And what Bee shares with her is that when we're sitting here by the creek and we're wanting to release and let go of hurt and of pain, we need to sit so our heart flows downstream, so that the river or the creek, that it takes all the pain in our heart and it flows downstream. So that is one example around one of the ways that being on the land can help to heal us by being near the water. So when I speak of trauma, and let me be upfront at the beginning, I am not a doctor, I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist. I am trained as a psychiatric nurse and I have done a lot of research around trauma, but I do want to give that caveat at the front. So when I think about trauma and I look at, the Diagnostic Statistic Manual and its long definition that is so clear, but sometimes when I'm with somebody, I need to be able to think really quickly, am I sitting with someone who has or is experiencing trauma? And so for me, I have this definition that is situations or events where I think or I know that there's a threat to my life, some part of my body, or my dignity. Or there's a threat to somebody that I love, their life, some part of their body, or their dignity. So with that definition, can bullying be traumatic? For sure it can, because without any other further looking, it is a threat to our dignity. And as we've seen in this country and around the world, it has also often caused loss of life. This also helps us to understand why sometimes parents or grandparents or aunties and uncles or so profoundly triggered when a child or a young person they love is being bullied, or there's racial remarks or racial slurs, because it's also traumatic for them.